Jake Morrison sat in the big white chair at the long table. His hands were folded in front of him. His face showed nothing. He had been sitting here for 3 months. 3 long months of talking and getting nowhere. The room was huge. The ceiling went up so high that Jake could barely see the top. Lights hung down like stars. Around the room sat beings from all over the galaxy. Some had scales, some had wings. Some looked almost human, but with different colored skin or extra arms. At the front of the room sat the council leaders. They were old and wise, or at least they thought they were wise. Jake was starting to wonder about that. The war had been going on for 2 years now. The Kethver Empire and the Zephyrian Federation were fighting. They were fighting over planets and trade routes and old arguments that nobody could remember how they started. Billions of people were dying. Whole star systems were being destroyed. Jake looked across the room at General Vaxthul. The Kethver general was big and scary. His scales were dark green and they moved when he was angry. Right now they were moving a lot. His yellow eyes stared at Jake with hate. Next to Jake sat Captain Lisa Barnes. She was his military advisor. Lisa was tough. She had fought in wars before humans joined the galaxy. Her hand kept moving toward her weapon, but she stopped herself each time. No weapons were allowed in this room. It was a rule on the other side. Of the room sat Counselor Tethran. The Zephyrian was beautiful in a strange way. Her wings were blue and green and they caught the light. She looked scared. Her people were losing the war. Every day more of their worlds fell to the Kethver. The humans speak of peace, General Vaxthul said. His voice was like rocks grinding together. But what do they know? They only left their small planet a few hundred years ago. They are babies compared to us? Jake had heard this many times. Every day for 3 months? The general liked to remind everyone how young humans were, how primitive they were, how they had no right to tell older races what to do. Counselor Tethran looked at Jake with hope in her large eyes. Please, Ambassador Morrison, she said. Her voice was like music. Surely there must be another way. Your people have helped solve problems before. That was true. Humans had stopped 3 wars since joining the galactic community. Each time they had found clever solutions. They had studied history and found ways to make everyone happy. Or at least not completely angry, but this time was different. This time, nobody wanted to listen. Jake had brought ideas from Earth's history. He had shown them how old enemies became friends. He had explained trade agreements and border sharing and peace treaties that lasted for centuries. Every idea was shot down. The Kethver wanted all the disputed systems. The Zephyrians wanted to keep all their worlds. Neither side would give up anything, and both sides treated the humans like children who should be quiet while the adults talked. General Vaxthul stood up. He was even bigger standing. His claws scraped on the floor. The Zephyrians are weak, he said. They deserve to lose their worlds. The strong should rule the weak. That is the way of the universe. That is not the way of peace, Jake said quietly. The general laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Peace? You humans know nothing of war. You have never faced a real enemy. You sit on your safe worlds and pretend to understand galactic politics. Jake felt something cold in his chest. Captain Barnes shifted in her chair. Her face was getting red. Counselor Prime Yethmuk spoke from his big chair at the front. He was the oldest being in the room. His skin was silver and his eyes were ancient. General, please. The humans have shown wisdom in past conflicts. Wisdom? Vaxthul's scales rippled with anger. They offer weak solutions for weak beings. The galaxy needs strength, not more talking. Jake had heard enough. 3 months of this. 3 months. Of bringing solutions and being called stupid. 3 months of watching billions die while 2 stubborn races refused to compromise. He stood up slowly. The room got quiet. Everyone was looking at him. General Vaxthul, Jake said. His voice was calm, but something in it made people listen. You say humans are primitive. You say we don't understand war. You say we are too young to know about galactic politics. The general nodded. Finally you understand your place, human. Jake started putting his papers in his bag. Each movement was careful and slow. "Maybe you're right," he said. "Maybe we are too young, too naive, too stupid to understand how things work out here." Captain Barnes was staring at him. She knew that tone. It was the tone Jake used right before he did something that would change everything. "Captain Barnes," Jake said without looking at her. "Signal the fleet. We're going home." The words hit the room like a bomb. Gasps came from all around. Some beings stood up. Others started talking fast in their own languages. Counselor Tethran flew out of her chair, her wings spread wide with panic. "Ambassador, surely you don't mean to leave?" "Without human support, there can be no peace treaty." That was the point, Jake thought. Everyone knew it. The humans were the only ones strong enough to make both sides follow any agreement. Without human ships to keep the peace, any treaty was just words on paper. "I mean exactly what I said," Jake replied. He closed his bag and picked it up. "Humanity withdraws from these talks. We are done trying to make peace between people who don't want peace." General Vaxthal was laughing again. But this time it sounded forced. "Good," he said. "We don't need the weak humans anyway. The Kethver will bring order to this galaxy." But Counselor Prime Yethmak was not laughing. He was looking at historical records on his personal screen. His silver face was getting pale. In his long life, he had learned to read between the lines. He had learned to watch for danger signs. The human delegation was walking toward the door. Other beings were calling out to them. Some were begging them to stay. Others were asking what would happen now. Jake stopped at the door. He turned around. One last time. The room was full of noise and panic and fear. "General," he said to Vaxthal, "you wanted to see what happens when humans stop playing by civilized rules. Congratulations." The door closed behind them with a soft sound. In the hallway, Captain Barnes walked beside Jake. "Sir," she said quietly, "are you sure about this?" Jake nodded. "Lisa, we tried their way. We tried being nice, we tried being reasonable. We tried finding solutions that worked for everyone." They reached the transport bay. Their ship was waiting. It was small and white and looked peaceful. It looked like a ship built for exploration and diplomacy. "What now?" Barnes asked. Jake looked back at the council building one last time. Inside, he could hear shouting and arguing. The peace talks were falling apart completely. "Now," he said, "we remind the galaxy why humans created rules for civilized warfare in the first place." The ship lifted off from Nexus Prime Station. As it jumped to hyperspace, emergency alarms were going off in the council chambers. The panic was beginning. Behind them, General Vaxthal was still celebrating his victory over the weak humans. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of his trading ship, Free Trader, and watched something he had never seen before. The human border was lighting up with defense platforms. Big metal stations that had been sleeping for decades were suddenly awake and glowing with power. Ryan had been a trader for 15 years. His ship carried goods between human space and the rest of the galaxy. He knew these border systems well. They had always been quiet, peaceful. The defense platforms were old, and most people thought they didn't even work anymore. Now they were very much awake. "Captain," said his navigator, Cathara. She was a Zephyrian with beautiful blue wings. Her voice was worried. "I'm getting readings I've never seen before. Those platforms are charging weapons that shouldn't exist." Behind Ryan, his crew worked at their stations. They came from 6 different worlds. A Trilaxian engineer, 2 Alterian mechanics, a human pilot, and Cathara. They had worked together for years. They were like family, but today everyone was scared. "Captain," his pilot Danny Walsh called out. "I just got a message from command. All human ships are ordered to return home immediately. No exceptions." Ryan had been expecting this. 3 days ago, every human in the galaxy had gotten the same message. "Come home now. Don't ask questions. Just come home." At first, people thought it was a mistake. Then they realized it wasn't. "What about us?" asked Kethanox, his Alterian engineer. "What happens to non-human crew?" Ryan looked at his mixed crew. These people trusted him. They had followed him to dangerous places and helped him build a successful Business. Now the human government was telling him to abandon them. "You're coming with me," Ryan said. "All of you. I'm not leaving anyone behind." But even as he said it, Ryan wondered what they would find when they reached human space. And what would happen to the galaxy they were leaving behind on Nexus Prime Station? The emergency meetings had been going on for 3 days straight. The council chambers that had been full of hope just a week ago now felt empty and cold. The human delegation was gone. Their offices were closed. Even their junior staff had disappeared. Counselor Prime Yethmak sat in his private office looking at reports that made no sense. Human trade ships were vanishing from space lanes across the galaxy. Diplomatic posts were being abandoned. Even human tourists were packing up and leaving. "Sir," said his aide, a young Trilaxian named Kexmore, "we've received another request from the Merchants Guild. They want to know when human trade will resume." Yethmak shook his ancient head. "I don't think it will resume, my young friend. I think we have made a terrible mistake. In the 3 days since the humans left, the peace talks had completely fallen apart. Without human mediators, the Kethver and Zephyrians had stopped even pretending to negotiate. Both sides were moving their fleets into position for bigger battles. General Vaxthel was in his command center, planning new attacks. He felt good about himself. The weak humans were gone. Now he could show the galaxy what real strength looked like, but his intelligence officers were bringing him reports that worried him. "General," said Commander Thekvel, his top spy, "our sources in human space have gone quiet, all of them. Even our deep cover agents have stopped reporting." Vaxthel waved a clawed hand. "They're probably just scared. Humans are cowards. They ran away when things got difficult. Sir, with respect, our long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from human space. Industrial activity on a scale we've never seen before." The general's scales shifted with annoyance. "Building more trading ships, no doubt. Let them waste their time on commerce while warriors shape the galaxy." But Commander Thekvel had been a spy for 30 years. He knew the difference between civilian construction and military buildup. What he was seeing in the reports looked very much like the second one. Lieutenant Sarah Kim was one of the last humans on Nexus Prime. She worked in the diplomatic office, handling paperwork and answering questions. Every day, more aliens came to ask her what was happening. Today, Counselor Nexther of the Trilaxian Syndicate sat across from her desk. He was a small, nervous being with too many eyes. All of them were looking at Sarah with worry. "Lieutenant," he said, "my government needs to know what humanity is planning. Our trade agreements, our defense pacts, everything is being canceled. What should we tell our people?" Sarah looked at the stack of documents on her desk. Cancellation notices, withdrawal forms, termination papers. One by one, humanity was cutting every tie that connected them to galactic civilization. "Counselor," she said carefully, "I can only process the paperwork I've been given. I don't know about bigger policy decisions." That was true, but also not. The whole truth: Sarah had been getting messages from home. Not official orders, but personal notes from friends and family. The messages all said the same thing: big changes were coming. "Get ready, but surely you know something," Nexter pressed. "The energy readings from your space, the fleet movements, the industrial activity?" Sarah shook her head. "I just handled diplomatic paperwork, sir, nothing else." After the counselor left, Sarah looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, in human space, something big was happening. She wished she knew what it was. Dr. Emma Rodriguez was still on the station, too. She was a scientist who studied alien biology. Her research was important, and she didn't want to leave it unfinished, but every day it got harder to concentrate. "Emma," said her research partner, Kelthan. He was an Alterian with silver skin and kind eyes. "Have you heard from your family recently?" Emma shook her head. "I try to call them every day. The system just says all communication channels are temporarily unavailable. Even my brother Marcus won't answer, and he always answers." What Emma didn't know was that her brother was very busy. Colonel Marcus Rodriguez was standing in a command center that didn't officially exist, watching displays that showed the biggest military mobilization in human history. Sir, his aide reported, Fleet Group 7 has finished loading supplies. They're ready to move to their staging area. Marcus nodded. Around him, hundreds of officers worked at stations monitoring ship movements, supply lines, and troop deployments. This facility was buried deep under a mountain on a world that most galactic maps didn't even show. What's the status on civilian evacuation? Marcus asked. 97% complete, sir. All civilian assets will be secure within 48 hours. Marcus thought about his sister, still out there on Nexus Prime. He wanted to call her, to tell her to come home immediately. But operational security was more important than family worry. Emma would be safe. All the humans would be brought home before Phase 2 began. Phase 2, even thinking about it, made Marcus feel sick. Humanity had spent 200 years trying to be the good guys in galactic politics. They had been peacekeepers, mediators, helpers. They had used their technology and knowledge to make life better for everyone, but the galaxy had made its choice. It wanted to see what humans looked like when they stopped being nice. Admiral Karen Phillips stood in the main command center of Gibraltar Station. The station was new, built in secret over the past 50 years. It was bigger than most planets, and more heavily armed than entire fleets. Around her, displays showed the positions of human forces throughout the galaxy. Red dots marked combat fleets, blue dots showed logistics groups. Green dots were intelligence assets. There were a lot. More dots than most people would have expected. Admiral, reported Colonel Ben Parker, her aide. All assets are in position. Border security is active. Civilian evacuation is nearly complete, Phillips nodded. She was a small woman with gray hair and gentle eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. She was also one of the most dangerous military commanders in the galaxy. Send word to Ambassador Morrison, she said quietly. Tell him we're ready for Phase 2. Morrison was back on Earth now, meeting with the President and the Joint Chiefs. The decision had already been made, but they were going through the formalities. Jake, said President Jennifer Williams, are you sure this is the only way? Morrison looked tired. 3 months of trying to make peace had worn him down. Madam President, we offered them every solution we could think of. They called us weak and stupid and told us to go home, so we're going home. And after that, Morrison's expression hardened. After that, we show them why we spent so much effort trying to avoid this outcome. The President nodded. She had hoped it wouldn't come. To this, for 2 centuries, humanity had tried to be different. They had tried to prove that intelligence was better than strength, and that cooperation was better than conquest, but some lessons could only be learned the hard way. In space, the last human civilian ships were crossing the border into human territory. Behind them, automated defense systems came online. Systems that had been disguised as simple border markers for decades were revealing their true nature. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their desire for peace, it had been their ability to prepare for war while hoping they would never need to use that preparation. That hope was dead now. Phase 2 was about to begin. The emergency alarm in the council chambers made a sound like a dying animal. Counselor Prime Yethmak had heard that alarm only 3 times in his long life. Each time, it meant something terrible was about to happen. Today, it meant the humans were finally ready to talk. The main display flickered to life, but the face that appeared was not Ambassador Morrison. This was someone new. Someone who looked like he had never smiled in his life. Fleet Admiral Nathan Cross stood on what was clearly a military bridge. Behind him, tactical displays showed numbers that made even the war-hardened council members feel cold inside. Ships, weapons, deployment zones, all arranged with the precision of a species that had been planning for this moment for a very long time. Honored counselors, Cross said. His voice was flat and hard. I am Admiral Cross, Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces. I bring a message from the President of the Terran Federation. Counselor Prime Yethmak leaned forward in his ancient chair. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of worlds watched with growing fear. The human had the look of someone who was done asking nicely. Admiral, Yethmak said carefully, we are pleased to hear from humanity again. Perhaps we can discuss returning to negotiations. There will be no discussion. Cross cut him off. The words hit the chamber like physical blows. For 3 months, humanity offered solutions to end the Kethver-Zephyrian conflict. We were mocked, we were dismissed, we were insulted. You made your choice. Now we make ours. The display behind Cross changed to show a map of the galaxy. Red zones marked Kethver territory. Blue showed Zephyrian space. Gray clouds showed where the two sides were still fighting. The fighting zones were spreading like a disease. General Vaxthal was in the chamber today. He had come to gloat about his recent victories against the Zephyrians. Now he sat very still, his scales barely moving. The Kethver Empire has 12 hours to cease all hostilities and withdraw to their pre-war borders, Cross continued, his voice never changed tone. He could have been reading a shopping list. The Zephyrian Federation has 12 hours to stand down their fleets and accept the same borders. Any ship from either faction found in disputed space after that deadline will be considered hostile. The chamber erupted. Representatives jumped to their feet. Some were shouting questions. Others were demanding explanations. A few were quietly calculating how fast their own ships could get out of the disputed zones. General Vaxthal's laugh cut through the noise like a blade. "And what will the cowardly humans do?" he roared. "Send us a strongly worded letter? File a complaint with the Trade Commission?" Admiral Cross looked directly at the Kethver general. For a moment, his expression changed. The cold mask slipped, and something much more dangerous showed through. "General," Cross said quietly, "you seem to have forgotten something important. About human history, we are very, very good at warfare. The only reason galactic civilization has enjoyed 2 centuries of relative peace is because we chose to be peacekeepers rather than conquerors." The tactical display zoomed in on the Kepler sector. A major battle had been raging there for 2 weeks. Hundreds of ships from both fleets were locked in brutal combat around a resource-rich star system. It was one of the biggest space battles in decades. "You have 10 hours and 37 minutes remaining," Cross said. "I suggest you use them wisely." The transmission ended. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. General Vaxthal was the first to speak. "Empty threats," he declared, but his voice was not as steady as before. "The Kethver Empire fears nothing from these mammals," but Counselor Prime Yethmak was not listening to the general. He was studying historical records on his personal display. What he found made his silver skin go pale. "General," he said quietly, "I suggest you review human military history more carefully, particularly their concept of total war." Vaxthal waved a dismissive claw. "I know their history, small wars on one planet. Nothing compared to galactic conflict." "No," Yethmak said. "You know what they wanted you to know? But consider this, in 200 years of galactic membership, humans have fought exactly 3 military conflicts, each lasted less than a week. Each ended with complete human victory. Did you ever wonder why their enemies surrendered so quickly?" For the first time, doubt crept into the general's yellow eyes. Captain Pete Johnson was in the wrong place at the wrong time. His research ship, Explorer, was in the Kepler sector, officially studying solar radiation patterns. Actually, he was there to observe the battle and gather intelligence for human command. His mixed crew watched the ongoing battle through their sensors. It was a mess. Ships from both sides hammered each other with increasingly desperate fury. The Kethver were winning, but slowly. The Zephyrians were fighting harder than anyone expected. "Captain," his tactical officer Zexpa called out. He was young for a Trilaxian with bright green skin and nervous energy. "I'm reading massive hyperspace signatures approaching the system. Configuration unknown." Johnson moved to the sensor station. What he saw there made his blood freeze in his veins. "All hands battle stations," he said quietly. "Emergency jump." "Now, but Captain," Zexpa protested, "our research mission. Move, move, move." Johnson shouted. The Explorer vanished into hyperspace just as the first human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. What emerged from the swirling energy was not the small defensive fleets that most species associated with human military power. This was something entirely different. Battle. Group Omega consisted of 47 ships. The smallest was larger than most alien cruisers. The largest was bigger than anything currently fighting in the Kepler sector. But it wasn't their size that was terrifying, it was their design. These were not exploration vessels converted for combat. These were not defensive platforms designed to protect trade routes. These were warships, built from the ground up for one purpose: destroying other ships as efficiently as possible. Commander Lavra Mitchell stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, the UFS Retribution. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency. No shouting, no panic, no confusion. Just professionals doing a job they had trained for their entire lives. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported, "both enemy fleets are converging on our position." Kethver Battle Group consists of 83 ships, Zephyrian force numbers 71 vessels. The communication screens lit up with angry alien faces. Kethver commanders with their scaled features twisted in rage. Zephyrian officers with their beautiful wings spread in defensive postures. "This is Commander Mitchell of the Terran Defense Forces," she said calmly. "You have violated human space and ignored our ultimatum. You have 30 seconds to power down weapons and prepare to be escorted to your respective borders." The response was immediate and predictable. Every weapon in both fleets opened fire on the human ships. What happened next would be studied in military academies. Across the galaxy for generations to come, the human vessels moved like they were connected by invisible strings. Their formation shifted and flowed around the incoming fire with impossible precision. Their weapons, clearly designed with lessons learned from watching decades of galactic warfare, cut through shields and armor like they were made of paper. The humans didn't just shoot back. They dismantled their opponents with surgical precision. Engine blocks were severed from ships, leaving them floating helplessly. Weapon systems were destroyed without touching life support. Command bridges were targeted with weapons that scrambled electronics without killing the crew. In 7 minutes and 32 seconds, it was over 70% of both fleets had been destroyed or disabled. The remainder were surrounded by human vessels and being systematically boarded by Marines in armor that looked like it came from a nightmare. Commander Mitchell's final transmission was heard not just in the Kepler sector, but across the entire galaxy. Someone was making sure everyone could listen. "Phase 1 complete," she said in the same calm voice she had used throughout the battle. "All disputed systems are now under human control pending final resolution. Any attempt to interfere will be met with appropriate force." On Nexus Prime, the council chamber had gone completely silent. The tactical displays showed the destruction in real time. In less than 8 minutes, humanity had ended a battle that had been raging for weeks. General Vaxtel stared at the displays with his mouth hanging open. His greatest battle fleet had just been reduced to scrap metal by creatures he had called primitive cowards. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our intelligence showed human forces were limited, defensive in nature." Colonel Linda Hayes stepped forward from her position at the back of the chamber. She was the human military attaché who had stayed behind to handle routine matters. Everyone had forgotten she was there. "General," she said politely, "did your intelligence services ever consider that what you observed might have been exactly what we wanted you to see?" The weight of those words settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. "How long?" Counselor Prime Yethmak asked quietly. "How long have you been preparing for this?" Colonel Hayes looked at the ancient Alterian with something that might have been pity. "Since the day we joined the galactic community," she said. "We hoped we would never need to use our full capabilities. We genuinely preferred peace to war. But we also remembered our own history. We knew that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to make the cost of war too high for anyone to consider paying it." She gestured to the tactical displays still, showing the aftermath of the battle. "You wanted to see what humans look like when we stop being nice," she said. "Congratulations, now you know. The age of human restraint was over. The age of human dominance had begun." The reports came in like a flood. Every few minutes, another communication arrived at the council chambers on Nexus Prime. Each one brought news that seemed impossible to believe. Counselor Prime Yethmak sat at his desk reading report after report. His ancient hands shook as he turned the pages. In less than 24 hours, human fleets had appeared in 17 different star systems. Every single appearance had ended the same way: total destruction of any military forces that opposed them. Sir, his aide Kexmore said quietly, we have confirmation from the Helix Nebula. The Kethver Third Fleet has been completely destroyed. Casualties are estimated at over 40,000. Yethmak closed his eyes. The Third Fleet had been one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. It had conquered 12 worlds in the past year. Now it was space debris and the human losses? He asked, though he already knew the answer. None reported, sir. As with all the other engagements, the humans suffered no casualties and minimal damage to their ships. Across the station, General Vaxthal was having the worst day of his long military career. His command center was filled with chaos. Officers ran back and forth carrying reports of disaster after disaster. His empire's greatest fleets were being destroyed one by one. General, called Commander Thekval, his intelligence chief. The 5th Battle Group has gone silent. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by human forces near the Omega Station. Vaxthal's scales were gray with shock. The 5th Battle Group had been his personal pride. 300 ships of the most advanced design. He had used them to crush the Zephyrian resistance on a dozen worlds. How many ships did the humans send? He asked. 17, sir. According to the final transmission, 17 human ships destroyed the entire battle group in 6 minutes. The general's legs gave out. He collapsed into his command chair, staring at displays that showed red warning icons across half his empire. Every red icon meant another fleet that was gone. Another army that would never come home. This is impossible, he whispered. No species could have this much military power hidden away. Our spies have been watching human space for decades. Sir, Thekval said carefully, perhaps our spies were only seeing what the humans wanted them to see. Colonel Linda Hayes was still on Nexus Prime, handling what she called routine paperwork, but the paperwork was anything but routine. Every document she filed was another nail in the coffin of the old galactic order. Today, she sat across from Counselor Nexler of the Trilaxian Syndicate. The small being was shaking with fear. His multiple eyes darted around the room like he expected human soldiers to burst through the walls at any moment. Colonel, he said in a voice that cracked with stress, my government needs assurances. We have always been friends to humanity. Surely we won't be treated like the Kethver. Hayes looked at him with what might have been sympathy. Counselor, that depends entirely on your government's actions. Humanity has no quarrel with peaceful species. But we will no longer tolerate threats to galactic stability. But what about our sovereignty, our right to govern ourselves? You can govern yourselves however you wish, Hayes replied. As long as your governance doesn't involve attacking your neighbors, threatening trade routes, or destabilizing entire sectors, the days of unlimited warfare are over. Nexler's eyes widened. You're talking about conquering the galaxy. Hayes shook her head. No, Counselor, we're talking about saving it from itself. There's a difference. Dr. Emma Rodriguez finally received a message from her family. It came through encrypted channels that she didn't even know existed. The face on her personal communicator was her brother Marcus, but he looked different, older, more serious. He wore a military uniform she had never seen before. Emma, he said, I know you're probably scared and confused about what's happening. I can't tell you everything, but I can tell you this: humanity has been preparing for this day since we first joined the galactic community. The background behind Marcus showed glimpses of a massive military facility. Emma could see weapons that looked like they belonged in science fiction stories. Ships that were bigger than space stations. Soldiers in armor that seemed to shimmer with its own energy. We didn't want this, sis. We really didn't. For 200 years we tried to be the good guys. We tried to solve problems with words instead of weapons. We tried to show the galaxy that there was a better way. Marcus paused, and Emma could see pain in his eyes. But some people only understand force. They took our kindness for weakness. They thought our desire for peace meant we couldn't fight. They were wrong. The message showed more of the facility. Emma saw production lines churning out weapons and equipment. She saw training centers filled with soldiers practicing maneuvers. She saw star maps covered with tactical displays. This has been building for decades, Emma. Every time we mediated a conflict, we learned something about potential threats. Every diplomatic failure taught us what we might need to be ready for. We just hoped we would never need to use any of it. Her brother's face filled the screen again. You'll be coming home soon. All humans in galactic space are being recalled. It's not safe out there anymore. The message ended, leaving Emma staring at a blank screen. Outside her window, she could see alien ships fleeing the station. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was. Running, everyone except the humans. Captain Ryan Foster was on his way home with his mixed-species crew when they encountered something that changed everything they thought they knew about humanity. Captain, his Zephyrian navigator Kithara called out, I'm reading a massive energy signature ahead. It's bigger than anything I've ever seen. Foster moved to the sensor station. What he saw there made his mouth fall open, floating in space. Ahead of them was a structure that defied belief. It was shaped like a giant ring, but it was easily the size of a small moon. Weapons bristled from every surface. Ships moved in and out of docking bays that could have held entire fleets. What is that? Whispered his Trilaxian engineer, Zexpa. That, Foster said quietly, is Gibraltar Station. I thought it was just a rumor. You knew about this? Kithara asked. Foster nodded slowly. Stories, legends, spacers have been telling tales about secret human military installations for decades. We always thought they were just stories. A communication came in from the station. The face on the screen was Admiral Karen Phillips, a small woman with gray hair and grandmother's eyes. But her voice carried the authority of someone who could order the destruction of entire fleets. Captain Foster, she said, you and your crew are cleared for emergency transit through Sector 7. Stay on the marked course and do not deviate. For any reason. Yes, ma'am, Foster replied. Admiral, if I may ask, how long has Gibraltar Station been here? Phillips smiled, and for a moment she really did look like someone's grandmother. 53 years, Captain. We started building it right after the Centauri crisis. We hoped we would never need to use it. As the Free Trader passed through the station's defensive perimeter, Foster's crew got a close look at human military might. Ships that could flatten planets. Weapons that could crack moons. Defensive systems that could stop entire invasion fleets. Captain, Kethanox said quietly, how many of these stations do the humans have? Foster checked his navigation computer. It showed 17 more similar energy signatures throughout human space. Apparently a lot more than anyone imagined. The galaxy was getting its education in human military capabilities one painful lesson at a time. The hegemony of Turval had been building toward war with the Crystalline Collective for months. Their fleets were mobilized, their invasion plans finalized, their propaganda machine ready to justify the coming conflict. They never got the chance to start their war. Admiral Cross appeared on every communication channel in both empires simultaneously. His message was simple and direct. This is Admiral Cross of the Terran Defense Forces. Both the hegemony of Turval and the Crystalline Collective will stand down all military forces immediately. Any act of aggression between your empires will be met with immediate intervention. The Hegemony High Command laughed at the ultimatum. They launched their invasion exactly as planned. The invasion fleet consisted of over 800 ships. It was the largest military force assembled in that sector of space in living memory. It represented decades of planning and preparation. It lasted exactly 43 minutes. The human response force consisted of 26 ships. They appeared without warning in the middle of the invasion fleet and began their work with mechanical Precision, no drama, no speeches, no mercy. Just professional soldiers doing an unpleasant job that needed to be done. When it was over, the hegemony of Turville no longer had a military force capable of threatening anyone. Their government surrendered unconditionally and begged for mercy. They received it, but on humanity's terms. But the most shocking demonstration of human power came when they dealt with the Devourers. The Devourers were different from other species. They lived for war. They existed to fight and conquer and destroy. Diplomacy was not possible with them because they didn't want peace. They wanted to test themselves against the humans who had been making so much noise lately. The Devourer. Grand Fleet was a thing of nightmares. Over 300 ships designed, specifically for maximum destruction. They had been building this fleet in secret for 20 years, planning to unleash it when the galaxy was weakest. They chose to unleash it against humanity, Admiral Patricia. Long was waiting for them with a single ship. The DNX Terra Nova was humanity's first publicly revealed superweapon. It was the size of a small moon and armed with technologies that most species thought were impossible. When the Devourer fleet dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find easy prey, they found the Terra Nova waiting for them like a patient predator. Devourer fleet, Admiral Long transmitted. You have entered human space with hostile intent. You have 30 seconds to surrender. The Devourer response was to open fire with every weapon they possessed. The Terra Nova's response was to demonstrate why humanity had spent 50 years building it. When the weapons fired, entire Devourer formations simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not damaged, they just weren't there anymore. In 6 minutes, 300 ships and their crews had been reduced to scattered atoms. The few surviving Devourer vessels were not destroyed. They were captured intact, their crews taken prisoner. The interrogation of those prisoners led to the discovery of 17 hidden Devourer bases throughout the galaxy. All 17 bases were attacked simultaneously 6 hours later. All 17 were completely destroyed, the galaxy called it. The 6-hour war, humanity called it pest control. The message was clear to everyone who was paying attention. Humanity had been preparing for every possible threat, cataloging every potential enemy, and developing countermeasures for scenarios that other species hadn't even considered. The age of unlimited warfare was over. The age of human enforcement had begun, but this was still just the beginning. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Jake Morrison walked out of the peace talks. The galaxy looked very different now. The constant news of battles and wars had stopped. Trade routes that had been dangerous for years were now safe. Pirates, who had terrorized shipping lanes for decades, had simply vanished. The council chambers on Nexus Prime were full again, but everything had changed. The same beings sat in the same chairs, but now they all understood who really controlled galactic politics. Jake Morrison had returned, but he was not the same man who had left. He carried himself differently now. His title was different too, Special Envoy for Conflict Resolution. Everyone knew what that meant. When Morrison made a suggestion, it was really an order backed by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The Kethfer Empire and the Zephyrian Federation had signed their peace treaty exactly 1 month after. The Human Ultimatum. The treaty terms were identical to what humanity had proposed 6 months earlier. The only addition was a permanent human peacekeeping force stationed throughout the former conflict zones. General Vaxthal was no longer a general. His replacement, Commander Crixtol, was much more reasonable. Crixtol understood the new reality. The old general had been given a choice: help the humans maintain peace or face the same fate as the Devourer fleet. He chose to help. Today, Vaxthal sat in a small office on Nexus Prime, working as a liaison officer. His job was to identify potential trouble spots before they could grow into real conflicts. It was not the glorious position he had once held, but it was better than being space dust. Former General, Morrison said as he entered the office, I need your assessment of the situation in the Outer Rim. Our intelligence suggests some of the mining colonies are having disputes. Vaxthal looked up from his reports. The proud warrior, who had once commanded millions of soldiers, now worked as a clerk for the species he had called primitive. Ambassador, he said carefully, the disputes are minor. Boundary disagreements over mining rights, nothing that requires military intervention? Morrison nodded. Good, send a mediation team. Small disputes have a way of becoming big wars if nobody pays attention to them. That was the new way of things. Humanity didn't wait for conflicts to explode into violence. They watched for the early warning signs and stepped in immediately. A trade dispute here, a border disagreement there, all resolved quickly and fairly. Before anyone could start shooting, Counselor Prime Yethmak had adapted to the new order better than most. During a private meeting with Morrison, he asked the question that many were thinking, Ambassador, was this always the plan? Did humanity always intend to rule the galaxy? Morrison's answer was measured and thoughtful. Counselor, we never wanted to rule anyone. For 2 centuries, we hoped we could be partners in a peaceful galaxy. We wanted to solve problems through negotiation and compromise. He gestured toward the window, where human patrol ships could be seen moving through the traffic lanes around the station. But we also learned from our own history. We knew that peace is fragile. We knew that there would always be those who preferred conquest to cooperation. So we prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. Morrison's expression grew sad. The worst happened. You saw what our restraint looked like and decided it was weakness. You forced us to show you what our strength looked like instead. The human military presence throughout the galaxy was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Human ships patrolled every major trade route, but they didn't demand tribute or control territory. They simply prevented conflicts from starting. Admiral Lisa Barnes commanded the Frontier Security Force from her flagship, the UFS Peacekeeper. Her crew came from a dozen different worlds, but they all served under human command now. The mixed crews had become common as other species realized that serving with humans meant being part of the most professional military force in the galaxy. Admiral, her Zephyrian intelligence officer Kithmo reported, long-range sensors, detecting unusual ship movements in the Vorthan system. It appears the clans are gathering for potential raids against the merchant guilds. Barnes's response was swift and efficient. Task Force 7 will intercept at coordinates 127 Mark 9, standard procedure, disable their ships and escort them home. If they resist, remind them what happened to the last raiders who thought they could ignore human authority. The Vorthan clans had a long tradition of raiding weaker neighbors. When they saw human ships approaching their fleet, they immediately powered down their weapons and requested escort home. The reputation of human military power had become more effective than any weapon. Dr. Emma Rodriguez had finally returned to human space. What she found there amazed her. The secret military installations were now openly acknowledged, but they existed, alongside research facilities and universities that were advancing science at an incredible pace. It's remarkable, she told her colleague Dr. Aaron Mitchell as they toured a facility that had been classified for decades. We built the most powerful military force in galactic history while still advancing medicine, science, and technology. Mitchell nodded. We had to. Every species we encountered taught you something new. Every conflict we mediated showed us a new threat we might face someday. We learned from everyone and prepared for everything. The laboratory around them was filled with technologies that seemed like magic. Medical devices that could heal injuries in minutes. Computer systems that could predict conflicts before they started. Manufacturing systems that could build entire fleets in weeks instead of years. The galaxy thought we were just peaceful traders and diplomats, Mitchell continued. They never realized that every human explorer was also gathering intelligence. Every human scientist was also developing new technologies. Every human diplomat was also assessing military capabilities. Emma looked out at the construction yards, visible through the laboratory windows. Dozens of ships were being built, but these were not warships. They were hospital ships, research vessels, cargo haulers, the tools of peace rather than war. So what happens now? She asked. Now we do what we've always tried to do, Mitchell replied. We make life better for everyone. The difference is, That now nobody can stop us from doing it. The galactic economy had changed dramatically. Without the constant threat of warfare, trade flourished like never before. Species that had been enemies for centuries found themselves working together on projects that benefited everyone. Captain Ryan Foster had returned to his regular trade runs, but now his routes took him through space that was safer than it had been in decades. His mixed crew had grown to trust their human captain even more after seeing what humanity was capable of. "Captain," his Trilaxian engineer Zexpa said during a break between jumps, "I have a question that's been bothering me." "Go ahead," Foster replied. "Your people built all of this military power in secret. You could have conquered the galaxy at any time in the past 2 centuries. Why didn't you?" Foster thought about the question carefully. "Because conquering is easy," he said finally. "Any species with enough weapons can conquer territory and rule through fear. But building something better, something that lasts, that's much harder." He gestured toward the star charts that showed their route through what had once been pirate-infested space. "We didn't want to be conquerors. We wanted to be builders. We wanted to create a galaxy where everyone could prosper, where conflicts were resolved through reason instead of violence, where strength was used to protect rather than to dominate." Zexpa nodded slowly. "And when that didn't work, you showed everyone why it was better to cooperate willingly." "Exactly," Foster said. "Sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to make war too expensive for anyone to afford." The new Galactic Accords were signed in a ceremony that was broadcast throughout known space. Every major power agreed to the same terms. Conflicts would be resolved through arbitration, with humanity as the final authority. Military forces would be limited to defensive capabilities only. Any violation would result in immediate intervention by human forces. President Jennifer Williams gave the closing speech at the ceremony. Her words would be remembered for generations. "For 2 centuries, humanity tried to be partners in peace. We offered our knowledge, our technology, our mediation services. We hoped that wisdom and cooperation would be enough to create a stable, prosperous galaxy." The camera showed representatives from hundreds of worlds, all listening carefully to every word. "But hope alone was not enough. Some of you chose to see our restraint as weakness. You decided that might made right, that the strong should rule the weak, that violence was the solution to every problem." The president's expression grew stern. "You were wrong. You forced us to demonstrate that we had spent our time preparing for the possibility that our peaceful approach would fail. You made us show you why we had created rules for civilized behavior in the first place." The camera panned across the assembled delegates, many of whom looked uncomfortable as they remembered their own roles in the conflicts that had led to this moment. "Today, we establish a new order. Not because we want to rule you, but because we refuse to watch you destroy each other and us through endless warfare. You will have peace whether you want it or not." Williams's tone softened slightly. "But this peace will bring benefits beyond anything you have imagined. Trade will flourish. Science will advance. Art and culture will spread across the galaxy. Your children will grow up in a universe where conflicts are resolved through negotiation rather than violence." The ceremony ended with the installation of human monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. These stations would watch for early signs of conflict and dispatch mediation teams before small problems could become big wars. As the delegates returned to their homeworlds, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. The species that had once been dismissed as young and naive had revealed themselves to be the most patient, most prepared, and most dangerous force in known space. The peace talks had failed 6 months ago, but the failure had led to something better than any negotiated settlement could have achieved. The galaxy finally had the peace that humanity had always tried to give it. The only difference was that now nobody had a choice about accepting it. Children across thousands of worlds would grow up in a universe where interstellar war was unthinkable, where conflicts were resolved quickly and fairly, where strength was used to protect rather than to conquer. They would never know how close their parents had come to destroying it all. The age of galactic warfare was over. The age of enforced peace had begun, and humanity, the reluctant guardians of galactic order, settled in for the long watch that would define the rest of galactic history.